When a trip to mainland China goes horribly wrong. Story by u/Imherforthamita. This is actually my mother's story, but I'll be damned if she's let me forget it. When I was a teenager, my parents were quite wealthy. My dad was a salesman for a high-end Chinese tech company, and he would regularly take trips overseas. There was one time that my mother chose to go with him. She had never been to China before, and there was some opportunity to get out of Hong Kong and experience the culture of the mainland. After a luxurious start to the vacation, my parents hopped on a plane and headed over to Shenzhen. Now, Mom is a pretty streetwise lady by U.S. standards. She's managed to survive some pretty intense living conditions and navigate the ghetto well enough. So I think she got incredibly arrogant here. At some point when my dad was speaking with his superiors in a meeting, she asked if she could head out alone to do some shopping. My dad's boss was apprehensive and told her if she really wanted to take down his number in case anything happened. While shopping, she was lured to a back alley shop that sold a pretty diverse amount of designer knockoffs, bootleg DVD boxed sets, etc. I am a huge TV fan, and apparently she thought this would be a great opportunity to pick me up the first 5 seasons of Scrubs on DVD. It was nothing crazy. There are places like that all over China, but apparently she chose the wrong back alley shop. When she was finished making her purchase, a legitimate-looking cab rolled up and offered her a ride. The cab ride was quiet, and it didn't take my mom to realize that something was wrong. The man wasn't driving her back where she came from, and I think he expected her not to have remembered the way to her hotel. There was a second man in the passenger seat with a stern look. The men spoke to each other in Chinese and did not acknowledge her when she spoke to them. They just kept driving. It took her less than a half a mile before she tried to escape the car, but the doors were locked from the inside. The men then began yelling at her in Chinese and threatening her. They took her purse and removed the money inside it and began talking among themselves. With one last resort, my mom called my dad's boss, who began speaking to them in Chinese via speakerphone. The men were spooked almost immediately. They stopped the car, grabbed my mom, and literally threw her out of the car into the street. They then tossed money at her. When she got back, she learned a few things. 1. The money was counterfeit. They kept her real money. 2. The men were part of the Chinese mafia. According to my dad's boss, people have a tendency to go missing in situations like that all of the time, particularly tourists. He said had she not made that phone call, she would likely be dead/abducted. The fake cab scam was actually quite a common method of these abductions. 3. My dad's boss has some sort of questionable but scary pull among the criminal underground of mainland China, or at least knew how to put the far of God into them. She still has no idea what he said to them. To this day, she gives me a lot of flack. Says, that Scrubs boxed set nearly cost me my life. Alone at a hostel in China. Story by u/Jukebox Voice. Hey everyone. Wanted to share an unsettling story that I usually try to forget. I live in China. I first came here in 2013, when I was 20 years old. At the time I was living in the capital. I was, and am, a student, and during breaks from school I enjoyed using the money I made teaching English to go traveling alone. In general, I think China is a really safe country as compared with the US. I have been followed and harassed countless times in the USA, but it just doesn't really happen here. People stare at me in the street. I am very pale and I have curly red hair. But aside from this encounter, I have never felt unsafe in any significant way. So around the end of my semester that year, I decided to travel to a city in western China. It is a city with a rich history, and I was excited to go check out the monuments and relics there. I stuffed a huge backpack and went on a 14-hour train, in a cheap hard seat, to get there. For anyone who has never been to China or taken a sitting or standing train here, just imagine the most crowded, loud, and uncomfortable metro or bus ride ever. For 12+ hours. People smoke in the carriage and I saw someone pee outside the bathroom. But really no big. I had traveled very far by myself before, so I handled it all pretty well. At the time, the city didn't have a very well-developed metro system, so after arriving I had to take a bus to find my hostel. Due to narrow streets and a high density of tourists, I was trapped in traffic for hours before I finally found the tiny hostel just inside the city wall. I was really tired when I arrived, but the hostel was beautiful and there were a load of people hanging out in the courtyard. The courtyard was partially open and beautifully adorned with plants and bird cages. I sat there drawing in my sketchbook for a while and chatted a little with some of the Chinese guests. After a while, I noticed that a very gaunt and spindly boy with big, staring blue eyes was sitting in the corner watching me. Eventually, he sort of slouched over to me and struck up a conversation. I judged him to be about 16 or 17 years old. I discovered he has the male version of my name. He said he had taken the train from Germany through Russia to arrive in China. He didn't speak any Mandarin, he informed me. Only 3 words he said, beer, thank you, and sorry. He was weird, had a strange, soft voice, and moved in this kind of delicate sauntering way. I felt kind of sorry for him and found his face interesting, so I agreed to help him go into the market and buy random baubles to bring back to his friends. He had a lot of cash on hand and intimated that he had made it selling drugs. This is a massive no-no in China, and I didn't want to know anything about it. We walked around chatting for a long time, and decided our route through the labyrinthine street market by flipping a coin. I helped him buy some things. We drank some beers together. Bonded. All very standard. There was a bar in the basement of the hostel. It had a pool table and draft beer, and was also teeming with foreigners. When we returned to the hostel, he invited me for beers in the basement. I love pool, so we played a few games for money. He was a shark and beat me every time. Because I was losing, I started to get bored and let my eyes wander around the bar. Then we saw each other. I accidentally met someone's eyes as I was sweeping the room. He was dark, shaved head, very muscular and tall. He had a kind of glowering look in his eyes. Not immediately scary, but unsettling. I don't know why, but I stupidly assumed that everyone in the bar must have been a guest at the hostel. Because the man's eyes met mine so exactly, I immediately figured that he must have been watching me. I was wearing a pretty dress, and sometimes when I'm drunk I become very haughty and self-assured, so I gauged that he was probably just checking me out. But I ignored it and went back to talking idly with my new friend. After a while we were both bored of pool, so we puttered over to the bar for more beer. After we sat down, the man with the glowery brow immediately stood up and beelined over to us. Without even saying hello, he asked, "Is this your boyfriend?" Ha! I thought. I was right, he was checking me out. The skinny blue-eyed boy joked, "Yeah, this is my girlfriend, we just met today." I laughed and told the glowery dude that he wasn't my boyfriend, just a friend. Glowers invited us over to his table, where there were about 20 people sloshing down rum and coke. My friend and I obliged. I felt safe. My friend was with me, and there were lots of other girls at the table. Glowers introduced me to a friend, another hulking dude. I remember he was wearing a striped polo. I don't remember any of their names. I drank a few rum and cokes, and at this point I was totally plastered but functional. I was joking with the skinny boy and laughing a lot. Suddenly, Glower stands up and says, "Let's go to Tango." Chorus, "What's Tango?" It was a club, just a 10-minute taxi ride away. At first I was reluctant, but cheers of, "Yeah, let's go dance," from the group persuaded me. The entire huge group of people, including my spindly friend, went outside to the street to hail a taxi. I was drunk, confused, and cold, but still laughing and joking around. My twiggy friend gave me his hoodie and then said, "I'm too tired to go to this club, I'm gonna go sleep. Hang the hoodie outside my door when you come back." I felt something fall off the shelf in my head. Twiggy Boy had been a sort of safety net. I liked him and he was giving me a very platonic and brotherly vibe. Not once had he commented on my appearance or asked about my relationship status. Just as a taxi pulled up, he disappeared. The large group of people suddenly dispersed, and the glowering man literally grabbed my arm and threw me into the taxi. You have to understand, I am quite thin and somewhat weak, and these two guys, Glowers and the guy in the striped polo, were enormous, at least 20 to 30 kilograms heavier than me and muscle-bound. I had no idea what was happening at this point. This part is a little blurry. I was sitting in the taxi between these two massive guys, inhaling their excessively applied cologne and deodorant. They were both really sweaty. I didn't even know their names. Glowers instructed the taxi driver to go to the club, and at this point I realized that his Mandarin was not very good. I asked where the big group of people had gone, and he said, "They're not coming." I felt a huge, dense pit of fear harden in my stomach. After that, no one spoke for a while. To break the silence, I started asking inane questions. They were both from Nigeria. They were students too, studying medicine. They lived in the city, and I then discovered that they were not guests at the hostel, but just liked to go to the basement bar to meet other foreigners. When we arrived at the club, I was shuffled out of the car. I had an impulse to jump back into the taxi and run away. I was very drunk and my balance was somewhat compromised. Before I had a chance to collect myself, Glowers had linked his arm in mine and started walking towards the doors. I didn't resist. I was scared. The club was on the second floor of the building and it was packed with people, mostly Chinese. There were some other Africans there, and Glowers ushered me over to their table. There was one girl with long hair. They appeared to be friends. She said I was pretty and asked, "I shit you not, where did you find this one?" Everyone laughed. I looked down and said nothing. Glowers, still holding my arm, dragged me over to the bar. At this point I was sort of a rag doll. I was afraid but couldn't seem to motivate myself to bolt. At the bar, he introduced me to the bartender as his new girlfriend. I was shocked and at first said nothing. Apparently this guy was a regular at the club because the bartender, a young Chinese dude with a cool haircut and lots of ear piercings, seemed to recognize him. He replied, "Oh really?" and laughed. "Yes, really," he said. He then put his hands on my waist and started trying to make me dance with him. He also kissed me. Now, to be clear, I didn't feel particularly freaked out or assaulted. This sort of thing has happened to me a lot in life, and I generally just shake it off and carry on with my business. I didn't feel as freaked out by the touching as I did by the fact that he was loudly declaring to every person he recognized that I was his new girlfriend. Remember I said I had discerned that Glower's Mandarin was less than excellent, so I pulled away from him and leaned over the bar. I told the bartender, "I'm not his girlfriend, I don't know this man, and he lied to bring me here." The bartender was not altogether alarmed by this, which I found extremely disconcerting. He told me, "You should leave." That was pretty much enough for me. Glower still had his hands on my waist. I pushed them away and told him I really had to pee, and to please let me go to the bathroom. He said, "Okay, but you better come back. Don't try to run off." He capped this off with a weird little fake hollow laugh. I went to the bathroom, which was behind a sort of dividing wall, but on the other side of the club from the elevator and doors. There I encountered a security guard, and I told him there was a man trapping me in the club. He asked me to identify the man. I looked over in the direction of the bar, and he was not there. I freaked out and ran into the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and stayed there for a few minutes. When I came out, Glowers was standing immediately in front of the doorway, smiling like we were old friends. At this point he could probably tell that I was afraid of him, because I was making no effort whatsoever to control my facial expressions or demeanor. Nonetheless, he took my arm and led me over to the bar again. The security guard noticed. At the bar, the stylish bartender started teasing him. "She's not really your girlfriend, is she?" At this point Glower started to get kind of angry, and I sort of slithered out of his hands, ducked under the level of the bar, and ran over to the bathroom where the security guard still was. The security guard told me, "He's looking for you," and I bolted for the elevator. I was crying, red-faced, and stumbling badly when I crashed into the elevator. I was alone. I breathed in relief. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, he was standing right there in front of the doors, and his face had changed. It was intensely disturbing. His brows were all knitted up and contorted, forming a weird knob shape over his eyes, which were engulfed in shadow. His mouth was twisted into a sneering frown. I was paralyzed in the elevator. There was another security guard on the ground floor watching this happen. That guard had no context whatsoever for what was going on. Glowers started shouting at me very loudly and aggressively. Things like, "You're a rude bitch, you know that?" And "You stupid C******. When a guy invites you to a club you don't run away without saying goodbye, and "You're disgusting." I was mostly just bewildered, crying from fear, and trying to will my legs to take me the hell out of the elevator. I finally felt the dam break. Adrenaline pumped through my body, and I didn't run. I flew out of the elevator. Maybe the fastest I've ever run in my life. I charged through the parking lot, insane with terror, arms flailing. At this point there was a crowd of security guards watching this happen, but none of them moved. They all just kinda stared blankly at the scene. I knew that the guy was chasing me because I could hear his feet, and he was screaming curse words at me the entire time. I don't know how close he was, and I didn't look behind me. I just ran. Had no idea where I was going. It was really late, I think around 3 a.m., and taxis were scarce, but there was one slowly circling the area. I ran for the car and jumped inside, slammed the door, and screamed at the driver that I was being chased by a crazy man and to please just drive in any direction at all. The guy actually ended up getting pretty close to the taxi. One of the last things he screamed at me hit me really hard. He said, You're F asterisk 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 ugly. I would never touch you. I thought of you as a sister, you greedy bitch. So yeah, asked my taxi driver to just drive around randomly for a while, then returned to the hostel and cloistered myself in my room. I returned my Twiggy friend's hoodie in the morning, hanging it outside his room. I sometimes find that I have a kind of spiritual/superstitious bent to my thinking, and at the time I imagined him as some sort of apparition whose gift had protected me that night. Never saw any of these people again.